Vadim gently pulled the hot tea closer and comfortably stretched his legs, feeling the rare relaxation after a stressful business trip. With almost no time to breathe. Now, under the steady rolling of the wheels on the rails, he could finally relax a little. It was ironic to admit that he was a shoemaker but had no shoes, a doctor but had no time to take care of his health. This was truly a paradox. Outside the window, autumn with its alternating yellows and greens passed by in bright orange stripes, his favorite time, when the heat had gradually receded and the cold had not yet taken over. To add to the excitement, this trip was to the south, to Sochi, where the daring were still running in the fading afternoon fee, among the ancient and majestic palm trees along the beautiful promenade. But unfortunately, all that beauty was only visible through the window of the official car. The conference revolved entirely around his opening speech, and he could not leave his colleagues in a state of confusion to wander around the subtropical resort. Vadim Andreevich Orlov is a famous Russian surgeon with the features of a true inventor. He always remembers that when he stands at the operating table, he holds a life in his hands. Therefore, if a patient's condition becomes critical, he will save them in the most unexpected ways, thinking quickly to find a solution to prevent the patient from leaving this world. After studying the reports, his colleagues in the profession will be surprised at first, but then have to admit that his decision was brilliant. Vadim has no time to enjoy the newly achieved glory. The new day comes, bringing with it other serious cases. When he puts on a medical suit to hold a scalpel, he does not remember what happened yesterday, unless that experience can be applied again. In his surgical department, there is a rumor among patients that if they fall into the hands of Orlov, they will always be saved, even when the Grim Reaper with his evil scythe is close. Vadim accepted the adoration of seriously ill patients with a smile. Stories that he was a magician were immediately dismissed. He sternly told enthusiastic patients, "You have a simple appendicitis. My colleagues will handle it well. Let me choose the operations that I feel I can be most useful for." Admirers of his medical talent would back off until another special incident occurred. These incidents often occurred when the hospital had wealthy or upper-class patients who insisted on medical services performed by Mr. Orlov himself. They did not consider other doctors as experts. This famous doctor only took on cases that no one else could handle. He had the ability to explain things convincingly without causing a scene. Even local dignitaries listened to him. Orlov's authority was unquestionable. And now, in the quiet and calm, sitting in the compartment he bought for himself, wearing a tracksuit, enjoying the relaxing moments in the current situation, no one knew that apart from his family, his wife Agatha and son Yegor, no one else understood his true self. For them, Vadim was ready to change his strong character, ready to make concessions, even to offer it on a plate with a blue border. Vadim glanced at his watch and thought, "I am a night owl. I can't sleep with my night shift routine." But now the whole compartment is quiet. Vadim heard footsteps in the compartment corridor and a loud whisper, "She's unconscious. The whole compartment is covered in blood. It's impossible to clean it up." The professional instinct of a doctor immediately reacted. Vadim rushed into the corridor. "What happened?" "I'm a surgeon who's in trouble." The two stewardesses gasped and stopped as if they were nailed to the spot. In car number 7, there was a pregnant woman on the way, but at the previous station, the remaining 3 passengers had already gotten off. I went in to check and prepare for the next batch of passengers tomorrow morning. I was going to take a nap, so I knocked on the door, but no one answered. When I used the key to open the door, I saw her lying on the floor, writhing in a pool of blood. I woke up my colleague and checked her pulse. It seemed to be there, but she was unconscious. Now we are running to the train conductor to report the emergency and need an ambulance at the next station. Vadim hurried back to the compartment, took the first aid kit he always carried with him, and said to the worried stewardesses, "Take me to the unconscious pregnant woman. One of you comes with me. The other one goes to the train conductor. We need to see if she has regained consciousness." Vadim walked quickly along the corridor, hoping that the bleeding could be stopped, that things were not as serious as they seemed. The flight attendant led the way, and when they arrived, the pregnant woman had indeed regained consciousness. She looked at him with tired eyes and muttered, "It's 38 weeks. I'm on my way to see my mother. I had painful contractions, thinking that labor was coming early. I've given birth before, I have experience, but then my head got dizzy. When I looked down, I saw a large blood stain under me. My name is Lena Danova." She tried to say more, but fell into a coma. Vadim immediately checked the condition of the pregnant woman and realized that the situation was very serious. It was impossible to move her anywhere, and there were no signs of labor. The cause of this severe bleeding was still unclear, but the best solution at the moment was probably a cesarean section. Especially when examining, Vadim realized that the woman's first child had also been born by cesarean section. The situation was dire, He needed to find a place on the train to perform the operation on the way. Vadim opened his personal medical kit, which he always prepared himself, not relying on the general standards. There were hemostatic tools, suture lines for the abdomen, clamps, syringes, surgical needles. He turned to the stewardess, prepare the operating room, disinfect all surfaces with alcohol. I need a completely clean environment, and collect bandages from all over the train. There's also a girl working in the restaurant car with a medical school degree. She seems to be a nurse. Wake her up, I need a surgical assistant. Vadim looked at the woman with gratitude and said I didn't have time to ask if there was anyone on the train who was a quick learner. And now there's a private nurse. This is a good sign. We'll make it. Lena stirred slightly on the floor and regained consciousness, whispering weakly in my big bag. There is a medical card and a notebook with my mother's address in Tumen. My eldest son lives with her. Contact them no matter what happens to me. Vadim reassured her I will do everything possible, but in his heart he thought, girl, your chances of survival are slim even with my surgical experience. And with such enthusiasm, the bleeding continued, but there was no blood reserve on the train. The cause of such blood loss could only be determined in hospital conditions with full surgical equipment. But I will do everything to keep you alive, believe me. The second stewardess who had gone to look for the conductor returned not alone, but with a man with a gentle face. He immediately threw out a series of burning questions. Dear doctor, how are our passengers? What should I report to the dispatcher? It's more than 4 hours to the nearest station. There are only woods and bears around. We can't expect any help right now. All hope lies with you, our hero. Vadim Andreevich raised his hand to stop the train crew's commotion and said clearly, right now, your second stewardess will bring the nurse and everything I asked for: bandages, alcohol. Your task is to keep the passengers from being curious and not to interfere with me during the operation. Contact the station so that an ambulance will pick us up as soon as the train arrives. The conductor was excited again. Nadia, who just worked as a waitress in Sochi, previously worked at a medical station. She has experience. I even trusted her to take care of me every day when I had high blood pressure during the entire journey. Finally, I returned home in good health. The stewardess returned with a pile of cotton bandages and alcohol. She and her colleagues quickly began to disinfect the compartment. The patient lost consciousness again, and the time was now measured in minutes. Finally, an electrician appeared with a large fluorescent lamp that he had taken from somewhere in the ship. He reported, I found this. The light will be needed for the operation. In just 5 minutes, everything was ready for the operation. Vadim Andreevich only regretted that there was only Novocaine for anesthesia. Fortunately, there were several ampoules of this drug in his kit. The doctor ordered everyone to leave the room, leaving only Nadia, who was wearing a disposable protective gown. Vadim injected Lena with anesthesia and began with a familiar cut in her abdomen. Nadia was very agile, giving exactly what was needed at the right moment. With a quick movement, Vadim released the baby, cut the umbilical cord, and handed the child to one of the flight attendants, who immediately wrapped the baby in a clean bandage. She happily announced, it's a girl. I'm not a doctor, but I'm the mother of 3 children. This girl is breathing under my arms. Her heart is beating. However, the doctor was still fighting the bleeding, but this method did not bring positive results. He understood that the mother's chances of survival were decreasing. Nadia looked at him with a questioning gaze. Vadim answered in words, she has only 1 chance of survival. I have to remove all her reproductive organs. Nadia recoiled in horror. Then she won't be able to have children anymore. She won't be a complete woman. Between the possibility of a long and happy life or the chance to have a 3rd child, the doctor always has to choose the first. But give me another clamp, Vadim ordered. Nadia, as a good nurse, it's time to give up romantic illusions about a big and happy family. Not everyone has that. After an hour, the operation was complete. Lena didn't have to leave this world right away on the ship. Now she would need to undergo recovery and follow-up visits at the hospital. Vadim Andreevich was almost certain that she would live and raise her eldest son along with her newborn daughter. One of the flight attendants poked her head into the compartment and said, Doctor, we understand that you are tired, but could you spare a moment to examine the newborn? We know you're not a pediatrician or a neonatologist, but we weighed the baby in the restaurant car with a digital scale. She weighed 3.5 kg, quite a big baby. As for her length, I, a former seamstress, measured her with my measuring tape, and it was 53 cm. Vadim Andreevich unwrapped the baby, checked her heartbeat, and felt all over her body. The girl was completely healthy, according to the doctor's initial assessment. He almost handed the baby over to the quick-witted stewardess, But then his eyes were drawn to a birthmark on the baby's buttocks. He couldn't believe his eyes. It was a bright red maple leaf birthmark, exactly like the ones he and his son Jaeger had. Confused thoughts flashed through his head. This couldn't be. Maple leaf birthmarks were family marks passed down from generation to generation. How did this girl get them? Vadim took out a notebook from Lena's bag and wrote down the addresses of her mother and her son. He had to figure things out. He had to solve this mystery. Vadim Andreevich returned to the compartment where his reluctant patient was. She was still in a daze, sometimes awake, sometimes unconscious, sometimes opening her eyes in a daze without recognizing anyone. People kept coming into the compartment door, the stewardesses, the nurse Nadia, and the conductor, who took turns bringing him tea, coffee, and sandwiches. But he didn't want anything. His mind kept wandering back to the small maple leaf birthmark on the girl's body, trying to relate it to the fact that he had only seen it on the men in his family. Genetics were amazing. Many things had been discovered in the field of medicine, but there was still so much more to learn about his own body. A sudden thought occurred to Vadim. The decision to take the train from Sochi to Novosibirsk in Nizhny was probably a sign from fate, one of those moments when you should listen to the instructions of fate. He planned to catch up on sleep for the 3.5 days on the train, knowing that if he returned to his hospital, he would immediately have to return to the series of operations. He flew to Sochi for the conference, but decided to treat himself to a short break on the train when he returned. And then he got an unexpected surprise with this maple leaf birthmark. A stewardess poked her head in from his compartment. "You left your things in the compartment. I'll lock your compartment door with a stronger lock. You're my official passenger. I'll bring you my special coffee with a dash of cinnamon. And I've got homemade cheesecakes. My sister lives at the last station we passed through. She always remembers me and brings fresh cakes to the compartment. You don't mind, do you? You've saved a life in these extremely difficult conditions." Vadim Andreevich suddenly realized that he was really hungry. He smiled at the woman and said, "Bring the cakes in. It looks like I could eat a whole piece of elephant meat right now. Just listening to you makes me hungry." The stewardess disappeared, and soon the conductor appeared at the door of the compartment. "Listen, our dear savior, why coffee and pastries? I ordered the restaurant car to prepare for you a hearty breakfast with omelets and other delicacies. The oriental dishes are so delicious that one wanted to lick one's fingers. We all thought that we would lose such a wonderful passenger, but thanks to him, it didn't happen. May God grant you health and long life. There is no objection." Vadim Andreevich wanted to end this fuss, but looking at the railway workers who were trying to warm his heart in every possible way, he changed his mind. Their gratitude and appreciation were so sincere that he remembered an old conversation with his father. "Medicine always requires kindness, but you have a tough character from childhood. How can you become a doctor with the soul of a warrior, a blacksmith?" his father had said. "But I'm going to be a surgeon, Dad, where nerves of steel and a strong spirit are needed." Vadim's memories were interrupted by the waitress bringing breakfast. After her came the hostess with a tray full of delicious food. They put everything on the table, and he began to enjoy. As his wife, Agatha, used to say, nourishing the soul. She always said that surgeons need to eat well to have the strength to work. Vadim pulled the blanket over Lena, who was still lying on the bed opposite. He gently inserted the thermometer under her arm. Lena was still very weak, but opened her cloudy eyes, trying to say something but not enough strength. She only tried to nod to him, but couldn't. Vadim comforted her, stroking her hand. "The worst is over. Only 2 hours to the big station. The ambulance will pick you and your daughter up." Lena tried to point to her bag, and Vadim understood that she wanted him to take something from it. "Don't worry, I'll contact your mother and son as soon as we get there. It's still too early. And there's no good signal here. Not a single broadcasting station visible through the window. This area is too remote." Lena's eyelashes fluttered, and a large tear rolled down her cheek, followed by another. Vadim jumped up. "Oh, why, my good girl, don't be sad. Everything will be fine. You will recover soon and continue your journey to your mother and son in Tumen. There are many good things waiting for you ahead." Vadim continued to caress Lena's hand while his mind was immersed in the old mystery, wondering, how did this child have the same birthmark as our family? Could it be that Lena and I are relatives? But I am the one who does not believe in this without DNA evidence. The decision was made quickly. He would get off the train with his patient, take her and the baby to the hospital, and stay with them for a few days. Fortunately, he had a whole collection of accumulated holidays, and who could refuse Vadim Andreevich Orlov when he asked for a small vacation, if necessary? Vadim Andreevich called Agatha and Jaeger at work, and of course home. After listening to her husband's story, Agatha hung up and told her son, "Your father is saving the world again, this time in the hold. He will be home in 2 to 3 days. In the Orlov house, there was always order and understanding between all family members. Agatha was always by her husband's side, but not like a wife in Chekhov's story. They got married when they were both 18, while studying at medical school, and knew from the very beginning that they had found their true halves. Vadim recalled his memories of his student days with Agatha. They met by chance, but fate had arranged everything. One day, Agatha, along with a group of friends, took part in a sports competition at school. After school, while walking briskly on the stadium, she accidentally ignored the sign and ran into the men's area. Near the bench, a young man was facing away from her, and on his butt, there was a birthmark in the shape of an autumn maple leaf. Agatha was stunned when she recognized the birthmark. When she returned to her group of friends, she could not hide her surprise. The friends around her asked her questions and asked her to tell them again. Agatha could only say there was a guy with a maple leaf birthmark. He was really handsome. I couldn't take my eyes off him. The girls around her did not understand anything and continued their work. Agatha realized that she was attracted to that birthmark. Love at first sight was definitely not a myth. Just one day later at the lecture, they met again in the lecture hall. Vadim took the initiative to approach Agatha with a smile without any other intention. "You ran too fast. I didn't even have time to introduce myself. I'm Vadim Orlov. We're in the same room today. Do you mind if we sit together?" At that moment, Vadim fell in love with Agatha when he saw her eyes widen the moment she saw him again in the dressing room. Just a month later, Vadim and Agatha got married right after a passionate first night where they were inseparable. The next morning, Vadim said firmly, "We didn't use any contraception last night. I don't want my wife to have any problems. We'll file for marriage tomorrow." Vadim was right. Agatha got pregnant just a month later. They had a big talk before deciding to get married. Vadim advised Agatha to take some time off from school to focus on herself and prepare for motherhood. Agatha realized that medicine wasn't what she wanted to pursue. She had trouble remembering technical terms and her hands shook when helping the nurse give injections. Her parents had convinced her to pursue medicine, but now she wanted to leave school, stay home and spend time with Vadim, as well as sew beautiful dresses for herself and clothes for their children. She realized that her role was to be by the side of the man she loved, taking care of the family. Vadim always appreciated Agatha for her excellent role as a housewife. She never turned into a slovenly woman in wrinkled clothes, but on the contrary, she loved cooking, keeping the house clean, sewing, knitting, and decorating with a good taste. She also did not lag behind modern trends. She had already learned to use a computer and attended courses. She raised their son Jaeger to be an excellent young man who showed talent from an early age, able to repair everything in the house from toys to microwaves. If anyone wanted to see a perfect family model, they should visit the Orlovs. It is rumored that early marriages are often not stable, but Vadim and Agatha have been together for more than 30 years and have never had any intention of cheating or divorcing. However, their son Jaeger was not lucky in love. At first, he spent all his time studying physics and mathematics, seemingly not paying any attention to the girls around him. Outwardly, Jaeger was very good-looking, but he was often busy with household tools and appliances rather than interested in the world of literature and the beautiful things around him. Jaeger was not interested in subjects such as geography and literature. He scored only average marks in exams, but in mathematics and physics he always got perfect scores. He answered the questions in exams excellently and was admitted to the technical university without difficulty. Already in his second year, Jaeger won all competitions among young students and became passionate about robotics. By his 5th year, he had several patents for 4 innovative ideas, leaving his classmates far behind in choosing a place to work after graduation. In his 3rd year, Jaeger began a light and non-committal love affair with a salesgirl at a supermarket near his house. In any case, his male hormones had already begun to work, and he could not resist the attraction. However, both Vadim and Agatha, Jaeger's parents, felt worried. Once, Agatha timidly asked her son, "Your mother and I love you for who you are, but I need to know this to be at ease. Are you really interested in women, or do you find your new boyfriend more attractive?" Jaeger laughed out loud. "Mom, you think too much. I'm fine. I just haven't met someone like you, someone I want to spend the rest of my life with. I don't need anyone else." After that conversation, Agatha was less worried about her son's behavior, but when Jaeger was away, she would still whisper to Vadim, "Our son is 23 years old and still doesn't have a girlfriend or a wife. That really worries me. You're wasting your best years on robots, and we probably won't have grandchildren anytime soon." Vadim, while brushing his hair and pinning it back, whispered to Agatha, he also has the red maple leaf birthmark on his butt like in our family, which we have always believed to be a sign of purity, luck, and happiness. I'm sure he'll be fine." Jaeger had been in a long-term relationship with the salesgirl Irina for 5 years, always taking care of her and treating her kindly. He often waited for Irina after work to carry heavy bags home for her. Irina attended every sale, and Jaeger always helped her clean the house and prepare dinner. Irina's daughter lived with her grandmother in the countryside. They had a peaceful family life until Irina had to go back to the countryside to take care of her sick mother, and eventually stayed there forever. Jaeger once visited Irina in the countryside, but after that his heart stopped and he did not continue. Half a year later, at a robot exhibition, Jaeger met a female colleague with similar interests, and they quickly understood each other. Just a few days later they were together, and after only a month they got married. Jaeger was extremely happy, feeling that he had finally found the woman he had been looking for all this time. They decided to postpone having children to focus on developing new robots. But then something unexpected happened. Jaeger's wife fell in love with another man, also a technology enthusiast, talented and passionate. She did not want to beat around the bush, but frankly told Jaeger, "I don't want to hurt you, but I can't lie to you either. I met someone else, a man with whom I now just want to live. You are a good husband, a good friend, but I can't go on. I'm leaving." Jaeger did not make a big deal out of it, did not argue or insult his wife. He let her go, although he was filled with pain, disappointment, and an irreversible sense of loss. From then on, he no longer trusted women. Faithful women like his mother with their devotion and deep love seemed to no longer exist. At the Adler-Novosibirsk station, when Lena was taken off the train on a stretcher, a whole procession of people saw her off. The train stopped for a long time while the railway staff said goodbye to Vadim and Erdich. In the first line of people waiting, the conductor, holding a wicker basket, hesitantly handed it to the doctor, and then explained, "Doctor, here are tangerines from my friend in Novosibirsk. The harvest has just begun, and this year's tangerines are very sweet. Please don't refuse. Here is a small gift. You have become a legend of our train, a man who saved a life in the dark under the rolling of the train, with only a simple medical kit. Anyone who hears this story will not believe it, but I saw it with my own eyes." More and more railway employees came to say goodbye to Vadim, trying to hug him by the shoulders and show respect. Amid the applause, 2 doctors, a nurse and the ambulance driver stood watching. The driver couldn't help but exclaim, "It's like sending off a Hollywood star, except for the red carpet." The neonatologist who was holding the baby turned to look at him with surprise and said, "This is a star in the medical field, Vadim Andreevich Orlov, for our hospital. It's a great honor to meet him." Vadim Andreevich was also well aware of his special status in the eyes of the people here. When they arrived at the hospital, everything was ready to receive the distinguished guest. The head of the hospital was very busy, ordering the staff to rearrange Lena's room. On the windowsill of Lena's room, a small vase with autumn flowers was placed alone, clearly a last-minute idea. The head of the department took the basket of tangerines without thinking much and said to Vadim, "Please share these tangerines with the patients. I just thought that in addition to decorating the room with flowers, we should also bring some sweets and fruits to create a more cheerful atmosphere. I will entrust this task to the head nurse. We could not prepare properly for the visit of you, a doctor famous throughout Russia and abroad. I am very happy to welcome you to our humble medical facility. A hotel room has been booked for you. You must want to rest after a long sleepless night." Vadim suddenly turned around with a slight smile on his lips and replied, "I will rest with my patient in the room. I want to monitor her, not as a treating physician, but as a close friend. I will leave the treatment to your specialists. I will contact her relatives in Tumen, see if her mother wants to come here. Please arrange an extra bed in the room, space permitting." The head of the department interrupted his words, turned to the staff with a nod and said, "Vadim Andreevich, I heard that you are a person who does not have a star disease and does not have high ambitions. But your decision to stay in the ward with the patient is a decision that requires a good reason. However, it is your right. As a doctor who also loves his profession, I understand you. I have worked with a stethoscope and needle for more than 40 years, but I am not tired of this profession. When I go home at night, my mind is still in the hospital." He pointed to the corner sofa in the room and said, "This sofa can be used as a bed for you. It has its own bathroom, a toilet, a set of household appliances, including a TV. If necessary, there is also an office available. The nurse's station is right across the door. Your patient is currently receiving her first infusion to help her recover, and she needs to sleep. Come with me, I'll show you the ward." Vadim immediately checked Lena's condition as soon as he entered the room, and then took out his cell phone and dialed the number on the note. Lena's mother answered after 2 rings. "Lena, why haven't you called for so long? Misha and I have been waiting for you, but you're nowhere to be found." Vadim Andreevich tried to keep his voice calm and said, "Hello, I'm your daughter's doctor. Lena gave birth to a baby girl on the train tonight, but we had to perform an emergency cesarean section. Both her health and the baby's condition are stable at the moment, but we had to take them off the train before reaching two men. They're in the hospital. Can you come here? Lena's mother hesitated for a moment, then replied angrily, my daughter is a restless person, and now you want me to take care of her and her newborn child as well. She left her 3-year-old son with me, saying that she would pick him up soon, but she never found the time. Now she is pregnant with a second child without telling me a word. I do not agree with this. Vadim Andreevich was confused by the woman's coldness. She did not ask what city Lena was in, did not care about the prospects of treatment, nor did she show any concern about what had happened. Instead, she was angry and indifferent. As a doctor accustomed to difficult situations, Vadim quickly realized that there was something less than sweet in Lena's life, and he needed to find out more. Vadim lay down on the sofa and observed his patient, confirming that her condition was stable. The doctor on duty was always by her side. As was his habit from many night shifts, Vadim quickly fell asleep. He only had time to order himself get up after 3 o'clock. You need to rest and recover. Exactly 3 hours later, Vadim woke up, not knowing where he was. Outside the window, the last yellow leaves were falling, and he could hear people talking outside the door. Next to the bed, a female doctor in a light blue uniform was sitting reading a book. Hearing the noise, she turned back immediately and announced, the good news is that your patient is able to talk a little, but is still very weak. We have just given him pain medication and sedation. Lunch is coming soon, and the head of the department is waiting for you in his office. Go straight down the hall and turn right. Also, the baby is perfectly healthy and is being cared for by our neonatologists. Everything is under control. When Vadim arrived at the dean's office, he found a group of people waiting to talk to him. Everyone wanted to talk to the famous doctor in a friendly atmosphere. They laughed and told unique stories about their work. Vadim thought that this stop was not accidental, but perhaps fate. And the first thing he needed to do was find out who the father of the child was. Not wanting to hide or make up stories, Vadim frankly told Lena, it was the maple leaf birthmark on the child's butt that brought me here. I couldn't mistake it for anything else. Vadim couldn't believe his ears when he heard the name Jaeger from Lena's mouth, but she had already begun to fall asleep, and he understood that he wouldn't be able to ask her anything more tonight. Before going to bed, Vadim tried to remember if Jaeger and Agatha had ever mentioned Lena's name, but in the usual conversations between surgeries, business trips, and meetings with colleagues, he usually did not pay much attention to what was happening in the family. Vadim had complete faith in Agatha's intelligence and life experience. Lately, his wife had been worried about their son, not knowing the specific reasons that led to Jaeger and his ex-wife's separation. After the divorce, Jaeger moved back in with his parents and devoted himself entirely to his robotics projects. He only appeared at night with a pile of components and often joked that he would put them under his pillow so that ideas would come to him in dreams. Just as the periodic table had come to Mendeleev, Agatha, out of habit, always prepared nutritious dinners for the whole family, although she did not follow the rules of healthy eating. In their family, no one intruded on the privacy of others, only when someone wanted to share. Lena's name was never mentioned in those conversations. Vadim wondered how Jaeger and Lena's lives could have intersected. He decided to find out more tomorrow. The next morning, the city welcomed a cold morning with fresh air. When Vadim woke up, he saw Lena, who had washed her face and looked fresher, greeting him. She said, Vadim Andreevich, breakfast will be brought to us right here. I decided for you that you should not go to the common dining room. I woke up early today, thinking about the maple leaf birthmark that suddenly appeared on my daughter, and I was ready to tell the details of my short relationship with Jaeger. You slept so soundly, while we were already getting up and going to the toilet. Soon the room was filled with the aroma of coffee. Lena began to eat chicken soup with a piece of golden toast, and both had a glass of orange juice on their trays. After eating, they were ready for conversation. Lena began her story from afar, as Vadim had requested, sensing that Vadim was motivated by more than idle curiosity. I was born and raised in Tyumen, she began. Our city was one of the first large settlements in Siberia from the 6th century. The people here are hardworking and simple. My parents also worked all their lives at the local shipyard. My father was a foreman in the workshop, and my mother was a cook in the canteen. I was the youngest daughter, born when my parents had no more hope of having more children. I was their surprise gift when my mother was 38 and my father was 40. But after 3 years, my father had a serious accident. Lena continued to tell her story, her voice quiet but full of emotion. When I was 3, my father had a serious work accident. His right arm was severely damaged to the point that it seemed to be there but no longer able to function. His fingers no longer obeyed, When he was 45, while rushing home after buying a small bottle of wine, he had a traffic accident, crashed into a truck, and died on the spot. At that time, my mother and I were really lucky. The wife of the chief engineer of the plant, a woman from the capital, could not adapt to the harsh climate of the Tumen region and was often sick. Her husband often took her to warm, remote places for vacation, and they often brought my mother along as a cook, along with a gardener. When they learned that my mother had a daughter, they agreed to let me go with her. My family moved near the Black Sea, and from the first sight I fell in love with the sea, a deep and intense love. Whether it was autumn, winter, or spring, although I couldn't swim, I could watch the sea all day long. I sat for hours on the shore, watching the waves roll against the shore. Then my mother bought me a notebook and pencils, and I started drawing the sea. I never hid. As long as she didn't hear me, she knew I had run to the sea with my notebook. Our dacha was just a short distance from the shore. Another discovery for me was the botanical garden. The chief engineer's wife bought me a ticket, and I went there often. The staff were very friendly. They let me roam freely, and I was fascinated by the flowers and greenhouses. One woman in the garden even joked that I was like the common daughter of the botanical garden. For 2 years before starting school, I lived in that paradise. The climate there was very good. I never got sick, and I grew up to be a healthy, rosy-cheeked, tanned girl. It was a dream childhood, but then a big shock came like a thunderbolt. The chief engineer's wife had to face unexpected changes when her husband met a beautiful and confident young girl who turned everything upside down. In September, before I started my first school year, my mother and I returned to Tumen. The chief engineer's wife was fired, and all her servants were also fired. My mother did not want to go back to work in the factory canteen, but when she returned to Tumen, there was a vacancy in the school canteen and she took it. In elementary school, what I remember most were raisin sandwiches and glasses of dried fruit juice in the canteen. My mother always had a consistent reaction when she saw a child. She immediately said, "Give him a sandwich and a glass of juice." Vadim Andreevich listened to Lena's story, for the first time looking at her not from the perspective of a doctor, but from that of a man. This girl has light blonde hair, medium length, light brown eyes with thick eyelashes and delicately drawn lips. She has a slim figure but not skinny, but everything is balanced and full in the right places. Lena is not a standout, but she is attractive because of her gentle, natural beauty, which leaves no one indifferent. Meanwhile, Lena continues to tell, I graduated from high school with good results. Only 2 subjects were good in my report card. I decided in advance that I wanted to become a landscape designer. My mother was horrified by this decision and always shouted at me, "Lena, be realistic. Tumen has a harsh climate, and your favorite flowers like Phalaenopsis and Bougainvillea, they cannot survive here. This is not Sochi." But I did not want to listen to my mother. I wanted to go south to Krasnodar, so that after graduation I could work on the Black Sea coast decorating resorts, hotels, and sanatoriums. Lena continues her story in a quiet and somewhat regretful voice. My plans were changed by marriage. My husband is a very artistic person, a designer, a musician, and a painter. He often laughed at my hobby of painting the sea. When my seascape won first prize in a student competition, he ridiculed my ambition for sea paintings, wondering why I was involved in this competition and whether I wanted to show off more than anyone else. My husband was very popular at school at that time because of his handsome appearance and deep voice. Girls were attracted to him like bees to honey, and the wedding ring in my passport was proof of our love. His long, black, shoulder-length hair was especially attractive, especially at night when we were together. Our son, Misha, looked very much like his father. We had been together for 2 years, but when I became pregnant with Misha, I had to go through it myself. I went to live with my mother, the place where girls often go when they are in trouble. I gave birth safely, but the doctors were concerned that I would not be able to give birth on my own, and that is why I had to undergo my first cesarean section. Lena was silent for a moment, then continued, Vadim Andreevich, I already know about my health condition. I will not be able to have more children. Please do not blame yourself. I hurt myself while dragging a heavy suitcase from the hotel in Tumen. I just wanted to please my mother and son. My mother is a good woman. Although she can be nagging and rude, she always forgives. At the Sochi station, I tried to lift the suitcase and felt a sharp pain in my lower abdomen, but then it subsided. I thought everything was fine and I would get home safely. But when I went to the toilet on the train, the pain returned and everything became worse. My ex-husband didn't really want to be a father. Freedom was more important to him, and only a small group of people knew that we were married. At home, he was a gentle, loving person who loved the meatballs and fries I cooked. But as soon as he stepped outside, he changed completely, putting on the mask of a charming man, a charming artist. But in reality, he was just a weak person, and I realized this when my illusions of love were shattered. When I decided to divorce, my husband accepted it with understanding. His eyes even lit up with joy. Finally, he had the freedom he had longed for. The lively girls around had been waiting for this moment for a long time, for Lam So to pay them attention. He didn't even come to the station to say goodbye to me when I was almost 9 months pregnant. His words, "Without a woman in my life, it will be easier," made me realize that I needed to leave. For the next 2 years, I lived with my mother and Misha as if in the arms of God. I made a living by doing odd jobs, but fortunately I managed to graduate from college and get a degree that helped me find a job. At that time, there were many villas with large gardens in the city, and in the summer, the owners wanted to decorate the gardens with exotic flowers. A year ago, an old classmate called me, informing me that the high season for beach tourism was over and it was a good time to earn money from landscape design for hotels. I didn't have to convince my mother much. She understood that we were having a hard time and that Misha needed better education. He had already started to take an interest in drawing, and I needed money to buy paints and paper for him. The resort welcomed me warmly, and indeed I received a lot of orders. Lena continues to tell her story with a touch of nostalgia and emotion. After the cold winter days in Tumen, when I arrived at the seaside resort in December, I felt like I was in a tropical heat. To change from my bulky warm clothes to a light jacket, to see the sea and breathe in the scent of blooming flowers, I could not have dreamed of anything more. So I threw myself into work with all my enthusiasm. Lena stops to rest and have dinner, the memories flooding back, making her emotional. Meanwhile, Vadim Andreevich decides to discuss her condition and prospects with Lena's doctor. Something in his heart tells him that everything is clear without a DNA test. His son Yegor had been to Sochi last winter for a 2-week vacation. That time he did not bring any robot models, which was a bit strange for a workaholic like Yegor. He explained to his parents, "Dear parents, I am exhausted. So many companies ordered models of my housekeeper robots that I had to hire more workers for the assembly workshop. I need a vacation to recharge. The dark winter sea with storms and the Caucasus Mountains will help me recover after a year of marriage." Yegor opened a small workshop. At first, his wife also joined in the work, often sneaking into the storage room to kiss when the staff was busy. They developed many models of robots useful for technological processes, but his wife always asked him to design a reliable robot for the family. Together they created a robot that looked like a housewife, laughing and talking about the interesting things it could do. When Yegor's wife decided to leave him for a new love, she turned to look at him one last time at the door and said, "This is our brainchild. Keep it as a gift. I'm sorry if you can." That's how it happened at first. Yegor couldn't bear to see this robot, calling it a women's toy that his ex-wife had envisioned. But then new ideas came to him, and he could not miss the opportunity. He began mass production of this model and quickly signed many lucrative contracts with hotels, restaurants, and shops. His robot was highly appreciated and quickly became a popular product. After the success of this model, Yegor knew for the first time what it was like not to worry about the amount of money in his bank account. He bought a lot of gifts for his parents, wanting to tell them through them, "Your child has grown up, now it's time for me to help you." Yegor has always loved Sochi since childhood. His family has been to this beautiful resort dozens of times. Sometimes, after a series of stressful surgeries, Vadim Andreevich suddenly suggested that the whole family go on a trip. The whole family immediately packed their bags and flew to a warm land to relax for a few days. And this time, when Yegor felt like a sad and exhausted robot, he did not hesitate about where to recover. Vadim Andreevich could not know all this, but he had just returned from a conversation with Lena's attending physician and was beginning to feel that everything was clearer. Vadim Andreevich discussed with Lena's doctor and received information that there were no contraindications to transporting her to another city by special medical means. Nevertheless, he was determined to listen to Lena's full story about how she met Yegor. He made an important decision. He would not let her return to Tumen with her mother, but would ensure the future of his granddaughter and Lena. He needed to put a full stop to this story, not just a question mark left hanging after the surgery on the train. Before continuing the story, Lena thought about her favorite book, Love on the Edge by Oksana Robsky. According to her, every love affair, even a short one, has 2 versions, one from the man's point of view and one from the woman's. Lena was curious about how Yegor would tell their story in Sochi, but she was ready to share her version with her savior. Vadim Andreevich, who had made the important decision, thought about how he would please Agatha when he learned that they had a granddaughter. Lena told him that the child's name was something he did not need to worry about or make long-term plans for, because time and fate would sort things out. He was not exactly a believer in fate, but he believed in the guidance of destiny. Lena looked into Vadim's eyes again before continuing her story. Yeager came to me one winter evening, appearing unexpectedly while I was standing near the port, drawing the sea. The sea was dark and angry, and the fierce waves were tossing small boats. Suddenly, I heard a cry from behind, "Aren't you afraid for the passengers being tossed by the waves?" I turned around and saw Yeager, with short hair and eyes that were shining without pretense. We started talking immediately, as if we had known each other for a long time. He shared his feelings about my painting, and I told him that I had fallen in love with the sea from the first time I saw it. I felt like there was a special connection between us. Yeager was very interested in what I said. He said that his family often came to Sochi to heal their souls, and this time he was here alone due to circumstances. He would have to return home to Novosibirsk in 3 days, where his business, family and friends were waiting for him. I told him about myself in a few words. I am from Tyumen, and we are practically neighbors, that at home my mother and son were waiting for me, and that I was working here. He did not bother me while I finished the painting, but stood quietly behind and watched. We left the port together and walked along the newly built path leading from the sea to the train station. Yeager rented a small, cozy and stylish apartment. Everything seemed to him to be spontaneous, without any prior planning. He frankly said that after his wife left him, he no longer believed in love. I told him the story of my marriage, and we agreed that this would be a short, no-strings-attached relationship. We had dinner together in a small restaurant, drank a bottle of champagne to celebrate our meeting, and then returned to his apartment. I had a day off and we spent the whole day together, only getting out of bed to make coffee and bread. A week later I painted the sea again at the same place where we met, and suddenly I realized that we, Yeager and I, had missed something precious. Lena continued, her voice quiet but filled with emotion. After 3 passionate nights together, I didn't think about the possibility of pregnancy. We didn't discuss the details of our lives at home, nor did we try to keep in touch. We just existed in that moment without any plans for the future. I didn't see him off at the airport because I didn't want to prolong the sadness of parting. When he locked the door for the last time and called the reception to tell me that he could lock the room code, I felt an emptiness creeping into my heart, but I quickly got over it. A week later, I drew a sign at the place where we met, and then I realized that we were stupid to try to prove anything. I knew that I was attracted to Yeager, but I am not a woman who easily chases anyone. During the nights we spent together, I felt that he was made for me, but I tried to push these thoughts away, although the truth is that I still felt it clearly immediately after he left. I went through a period of both elation and sadness. I realized that I kept singing the lines from 2 songs over and over again. 3 happy days were spent with you. I did not wait for them, but they came to me like fate afterwards. I reproached myself for letting my emotions overwhelm me. I tried to play the role of an arrogant woman, which was completely different from my nature. I realized that I was pregnant not long after that. It seemed that all the previous signs of pregnancy had been forgotten. I had no morning sickness, no fatigue or dizziness, no symptoms other than the usual physiological ones. I did not feel any discomfort and decided to visit my mother in Tyumen just a week before the due date. And then I caused trouble for everyone, and the whole train was affected. Vadim listened to Lena's story, feeling the complexity and emotion she experienced. This made him even more determined to help her and his niece. Vadim Andreevich did not contradict Lena, nor did he tell her that this meeting seemed to have been arranged from the moment he decided to travel by train instead of by plane. It was no coincidence that he chose this train among many others. When Lena finished telling the story of her brief meeting with Yeager, she did not wait for Vadim's assessment of the current situation. She felt much better, so she decided to take a bath without anyone accompanying her. Vadim Andreevich was lost in thought as the evening turned into night. He sat in the dark, without turning on the lights, wondering who had the right to judge this variety of love. Yeager seemed to have won the heart of this young girl, but he wondered if Yeager knew how to love children when he was only fascinated by mechanical robots. Lena returned from the bathroom, looking fresh and rosy. Vadim involuntarily thought that Yeager, his son, must have been attracted to this girl. Lena was a good-natured person. This was obvious even after such a short acquaintance. She was not noisy or pretentious like some of the other patients Vadim had met. She was honest, straightforward, and had a good character which was rare in today's young generation. Vadim greeted Lena with an offer. "Lena, I have an offer for you. Before you answer, think carefully. Don't rush to make a decision. I want to take you to Novosibirsk with me tomorrow, as the mother of my granddaughter. To make sure you are at ease, we can do a DNA test as soon as we arrive at my hospital. In order not to put pressure on you, I will rent a good apartment for you and the baby. Then, if you want, you can bring your son and mother from Tyumen to live with you." Lena turned to look at him with obvious surprise. "Vadim Andreevich, your offer is really too generous. But we have known each other for less than 3 days, and you saved my life. Know all the details of my life. How can you solve all these problems?" Vadim Andreevich smiled and replied, "Ever since I saw the maple leaf birthmark on my granddaughter, a sign of our family, I have had the feeling that thanks to you I have an extra motivation to live and work. My wife Agatha and I have lived together for almost 30 years, sharing all our joys and sorrows. We always dreamed of having children in the house, but Yeager's personal life was not going well. Now he has a chance to change that." Lena blushed and asked, "Do you really think that there could be something between me and Yeager? You know your son better. He told me that he avoided all women after the divorce." "I don't think I'm an exception," Vadim replied. "Everyone wants to have a simple happiness with the person they love. You are different, that's the truth. Yeager is a technical person, passionate about robots. And you are a creative person immersed in the beauty of nature, the sea and flowers. Do you remember a little about the laws of physics? Opposite charges attract each other. A person who is too similar to us will quickly become boring. In our city we have a saying, if you don't try, you won't know. Let's pack our things. No need to think too much. When we get to Novosibirsk, everything will be clearer about the next direction of our lives."
Lena could not contain her emotions. She walked up to Vadim Andreevich and hugged him tightly. "I will go with you, my doctor. I cannot forget Yeager. I want him to know that I have a daughter." At this time, 9 months ago, Yeager left Sochi to fly back to Novosibirsk. He struggled with his thoughts and wanted to look into his ex-wife's eyes again. During the 3 days he spent in Sochi with Lena, he was no longer tormented by painful memories. He simply rested. However, even after the divorce, Yeager still felt that his marriage was not really over. There were many things left unsaid and many questions still lingering that he could not find answers to. Yeager knew exactly where his ex-wife was. The world of robot creators is very small. Everyone knows who is where. His ex-wife now lives in the suburbs of Moscow, and she is still an inventor, leading experimental projects for the country's defense industry. As soon as he arrives at Novosibirsk airport, Yeager changes his plans, calls his mother, Agatha, to say he will be late, and then flies straight to Moscow. He is haunted by the desire to talk to his ex-wife to clear things up, in the hope that he can then move on with his new life, free from the past.
When his ex-wife arrived, she rushed into the cafe like a whirlwind, hugged Yeager and looked into his eyes. "Are you still angry with me, my dear? Forget it, I really missed you. I was so happy to see you again. My boyfriend and I have not yet completed the marriage procedures. We are living together in an apartment of my aunt in this city. I brought the key, we can go there and talk more privately." Yeager did not have time to think much. They took a taxi to the apartment and quickly climbed the stairs. There, what happened next was something Yeager did not expect. His ex-wife dragged him into the bedroom. He could not resist the temptation. It was an internal battle, a dialogue, an attempt to prove something to each other. But suddenly, Yeager clearly felt that his heart no longer beat faster when she touched him, that his soul was no longer moved. Noticing his coldness, Yeager's ex-wife looked up from her pillow and asked Yeager, "What's the matter? Didn't you want this? Do you know that in my relationship with my boyfriend, intimacy does not necessarily mean long-term commitment? If I told him that I wanted to sleep with my ex-husband again, he would understand. We have no ties. He gave me the keys to this apartment when he learned that you were in Moscow." Hearing this, Yeager left her and felt that he had changed so much from before. Yeager jumped up, a storm of thoughts running through his head. He had been madly in love with this woman, had considered divorce from her as the end of the world. He still had a classic view of the relationship between men and women. He wanted a lasting relationship like his parents, with his partner to go through life without changing. But now a thread had broken inside him and he felt freed from the pain, memories, and thoughts of the past. He could close this chapter of his life and move on. The dark clouds in his mind had dissipated. He declined his ex-wife's invitation to stay overnight, instead buying a ticket back the next day. Instead of spending time with her, he decided to wander around Moscow, visit Red Square, and enter the Cathedral of Christ the Savior, which his mother, Agatha, had first taken him to a few years ago. Their family was not fanatically religious, but his mother had once told him everyone comes to faith in his own way. "I pray in my heart, not according to rules and traditions, but talk to the Almighty wherever I feel the need." After walking around the city, Yeager decided to head to Domodedovo airport early. He loved the airport and its excellent infrastructure. He browsed the shops, bought a beautiful scarf for his mother, Agatha, and stopped at the women's perfume counter. He suddenly remembered Lena, the woman he had met for 3 short days, and her scent the smell of the sea, the sun, and a hint of young cypress. She had not told him much about herself, but the photographs of her work at the resorts on the Black Sea coast had made a deep impression on him. Her creative and unusual landscape designs had reminded him of the robots he was building. Yeager decided that he would try to find Lena in Tumen, since there must be some landscape design companies there. He would find her traces, no matter how difficult it was. In high spirits, Yeager returned home, where no one asked him why he was late. There was so much work and problems to solve that he had temporarily forgotten about looking for Lena. However, her image did not completely fade from his mind. Occasionally, her lovely image would appear in his spare moments, but it was quickly dispelled by the busyness of everyday life. Time passed, and the 9 months since that short love affair passed quickly. In Novosibirsk, the first thing Vadim Andreevich did was to take Lena and baby Nastya to his hospital. Then he went home to tell his wife, Agatha. When her husband told her about having a granddaughter, Agatha could not hold back her emotions and cried tears of joy. Vadim decided that he would be the one to tell Yeager everything, and that Agatha should not interfere. The DNA test was done the next day, and the results were exactly as expected. Yeager was the father of baby Nastya, with a probability of 99.9%. Lena recovered quickly and was able to take care of her daughter herself. Fortunately, she had enough breast milk to feed her. 2 weeks later, when Vadim and Agatha moved Lena into a rented apartment, she refused to move in with them before talking to Yeager. They decided that it was time to tell Yeager everything. That day, Agatha prepared a special dinner. Vadim Andreevich took a bottle of rare Irish whiskey, aged for 21 years, from the bar. When he saw the bottle on the table, Yeager smiled and said, "Mom and Dad have prepared a big surprise for me, right? Okay, I'm ready to hear." Agatha tactfully left the living room so that the 2 men could talk privately. After listening to his father's story about the incident on the ship, the operation, and his meeting with the girl he met in Sochi, Yeager was initially shocked. Disturbing thoughts ran through his head. He never expected that a short love affair by the sea would lead to such dramatic events. The image of Lena standing and drawing the sea on a gloomy evening appeared in his mind again. Yeager did not look at the DNA test results that his father had placed on the table, but only took the piece of paper with the address of Lena and her daughter. "Don't wait for me for dinner," he told his parents. "I need to talk to her." Then he left without saying goodbye. At a robotics exhibition later, the atmosphere was bustling and crowded. Yeager, the host and inspiration for the event, was surrounded by journalists. They kept asking, "What inspired you to create this line of small robots designed to be companions for children? Are you relying on old toys, or is this just hearsay?" Yeager looked into the distance, where Lena was wandering among the exhibits, holding the hand of 5-year-old Nastya, while Lena's 8-year-old son Mikhail ran around. She was still a mystery to them. When the press conference ended, Yeager asked everyone to be quiet for a moment and began a short speech. "Ladies and gentlemen, I am very happy to welcome everyone to the exhibition of my new line of robots. Many questions have been asked about my inspiration, why and how I created them. I will answer mysteriously. It all started with a small bright red maple leaf. It turned out to be a miracle, connecting loving hearts, helping me find the most precious thing in life." Then he smiled and continued, "Now, I would like to introduce my family. This is my wife Elena, my son Mikhail, and my daughter Anastasia. They taught me to understand the balance in life. Everything is simple. In the morning I am eager to go to work. In the evening I am equally eager to return home, where they are waiting for me." On the makeshift stage, Lena Orlova stepped up, followed by Mikhail, who was holding some piece of metal in his hand. Yeager thought for a moment, "I am very curious to know what the boy has taken off. This boy is just like his father. Some say that talent is passed on only through blood, but the truth is that genes do not always determine everything.